A program originally scheduled at this time will not be broadcast. The following pre-recorded program is sponsored by the Republican Campaign Committee. Autumn has come to the rolling hills of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. The fragrant smell of apples, ripe and ready for harvest, fills the air. The leaves just started to turn, and these are beautiful days. This might be a typical Gettysburg farm, but it isn't, because this is the farm of General and Mrs. Dwight David Eisenhower. And this is not just another routine day. For this day, the 34th President of the United States has a distinguished visitor, the Republican candidate for president, Senator Barry Goldwater. Since 10 o'clock this morning, when the senator arrived, the two men have been deep in conversation with time out only for lunch. We have been privileged to record their discussions, and tonight, for the next half hour, we bring you what we believe to be the highlights of the conversation at Gettysburg. Although the senator has been to Gettysburg before, this was the first time the general had the opportunity to show his farm to the senator. The morning mist was still hanging low in the hollow as they walked past the fence, enclosing the general's herd of prize Angus cattle.
Well, Barry, you've been campaigning now 2 or 3 weeks. How do you like it, and how does it seem to be going for you?
Well, I've always enjoyed campaigning. This year is a particularly interesting one because we know that we start out sort of the underdogs, and this is always a position that I like to start from. Our first week's campaigning, following Labor Day, started in San Diego, went through Los Angeles, Sacramento, up through Klamath Falls, Eugene, Oregon, to Seattle, and then back through Idaho, Montana, and Minnesota and Illinois. We were very, very pleased and excited by the crowds. For example, in Los Angeles, we had 53,000 people in the Dodger Stadium there. And as you know, that's quite a multitude to face. I think of that first week, the most pleasing results we had were in Minneapolis, the opposition vice president's hometown, so to speak, where we completely filled the auditorium, about 9,000 people, and had some 4,000 waiting outside. This past week's campaigning in the South, which is generally thought to be leaning towards Republicans, as you well know, you did very well in the South yourself. We had, again, tremendous crowds and much interest, but you can't always use a crowd as a measuring stick.
Is there any area of the country where you notice any difference in the amount of enthusiasm that you encountered?
Well, so far, no. We've had, as I say, excellent crowds. In Southern California, now, just a few days ago, we were in Fargo, North Dakota, to the annual plowing contest.
Oh, yes.
And there were some 70 or 75,000 people there on a rather drizzly day. The crowds are large wherever we've been. An interesting thing, though, and I remember this in your first campaign and even more so in your second, there's a large number of young people. You remember the crowds of youngsters you had.
Yeah.
Well, every year there are new techniques in this campaigning, and I'd hate to see us ever get to the place, General, where people were elected to positions of high responsibilities because they were, you might say, television characters or a Hollywood type or a television type that the housewife would look at and say, oh, I'm going to vote for him because he looks like this movie star, that movie star.
And I wouldn't do that in my case.
Well, I wouldn't want to argue that, or with mine either, but there is a tendency to this, and today with the use of teleprompters and the gadgets that you can use to remind you of things you should be saying or shouldn't be saying, I think it'd be much better, just this type of thing we're doing, just to talk across a fence about the problems that we face and let the American people make up their own minds.
I agree.
Yes, sir, let's do that. Sure would enjoy it.
The grass is wet from last night's rain, but the general, like everyone else in this part of the world, is grateful for the end of a long, dry spell. It's very peaceful in Gettysburg today. The roar of political rallies and the pressures of campaigning seem a long way off. Now, as they sit down outside the barn, the conversation deepens in intensity.
Beyond this, though, there's a very great field of influence that I think a president properly must exert. It is what I'd call a moral or intangible influence. When he is, by his example, by his words, he expresses, he hopes, what is the sentiment of the United States with respect to the kind of government they want to have, the way and the institutions, the health of the institutions of freedom, and you might say the moral standards of the people with respect to the decency with which we treat our fellow citizens and our normal habits of living that have been approved by such a nation such as ours for these centuries. Now, I think in this last field is one that is most important because taken in the racial matter, where I emphasize very earnestly, and I know you did, that each citizen has a moral duty as well as a legal duty to treat his fellow citizen as an equal and, in a matter of fact, observe the golden rule. And unless we do this, we are not really living up to the, what you might say, the exhortations and rules that have been laid down to us by our founding fathers. So I would say in the constitutional and the legal responsibilities, we know exactly what they are, and they're handled by different presidents according to their own personalities. The moral one is very, very important. Now, there's two others. One, the capacity of the president, of the commander-in-chief of the armed services, and the other, his responsibility, which has grown up with the years as the leader of his own party. And both of these are very important, and everything he does in them is should be in consonance with what we would call the American system, American principles. And while I can't here go into great detail about them, I think that you and I have expressed rather similar views with respect to those duties.
Well, I was particularly interested in your attaching importance to the moral leadership, because I think this, more than most Americans realize, is a great responsibility of the president. I know as we look back upon our great presidents, and you say, why are they great or why were they great? I think you'd have to come up with the answer that they were leaders in every respect, but particularly in the leadership of the morals of the people, and particularly in the fields of discrimination, where I've always felt, as you have, that a president who will reason with his people, trying to point out that these things are wrong, can accomplish far more than by any other method we can use.
You know, take one example. Look at the farewell address of Washington. The really splendid ideas that are expressed, noble ideas. Yet in his second term, he was vilified by the newspapers. They called him everything except a gentleman. Yet he didn't let it disturb him. He was too great a character, too big a man, allowed it to disturb him, and he really left us a heritage that all of us not only should be proud of, but as far as we can, emulate it.
Well, I think of that, and I think of Abraham Lincoln as he was seeking the office of presidency, and he was vilified beyond reason. In fact, if you recall, our own party tried to get us to take the opposition candidate instead of Lincoln, and Lincoln turned out to be one of our great presidents, and I think to a great degree because of the leadership that he exercised over the people.
Well, and how much he believes something. Really, when you come down to it, what is a political party? It's a group of people that have the same basic concepts about the relationship of the American citizen to his government, whether it's local, state, or federal, and what are his responsibilities and duties under it. Now, our own duties, our own concepts, really are the things that we, by our adherence to them, makes up a Republican Party.
The one thing that you've touched on so constantly, and I've touched on almost as often, is the dangers involved in a one-party system winding up in a centralized government. Now, if we tend to drift towards a one-party system, we also drift towards an acceptance of centralized government. And this, I believe, would be the immediate destruction of our freedoms. And if we forget that freedom is the real responsibility of all of us, then we never satisfy our goals in government.
Liberty is our most precious possession, there's no question. And we must be very, very jealous of it and put its preservation above all else.
That's right. A high standard of living, security, peace mean nothing if we're not free men.
That's right.
And this is the message that the Republican Party should be trying to get across to the people.
Yeah, I'm certain of it. And as a matter of fact, in our foreign policies, we want to use the same principles.
Always admired the foreign policy that you pursued, the basic policy, that of being strong, being prepared, but acting with restraint. And I think this is just the, you might say, the natural inheritance of any leader, whether that be a man or a nation, that the power we have be used for the best good, and if that best good means a demonstration of faith and a demonstration of strength, that we practice restraint with it all the time.
I can't tell you how strongly I agree with you. When it comes to any effort to use the great power that resides in the federal government by its ability to give contracts here, and to this man. Now, you've got a terrific strength there because, let us say, you're talking to a university or to a business firm, and something is done that displeases the president, and he can say, well, my friend, you better agree with us, or you may not get this contract renewed, or it may be taken away from you. That's the kind of thing that I say self-restraint is absolutely necessary to anyone who aspires to be a leader over a great nation.
I think this is the greatest needed quality because certainly a man in the presidency has unlimited powers. I frankly feel, as you've often said, that maybe these powers are too great. Maybe we should have them vested more with the people than we find them today. I recall, for example, when the trouble came up in the Formosa Straits, and you made it very evident, very plain to the enemy, the fact that we had the power, that we were not afraid to use it, but you had the restraint not to use it because they understood this and they backed off. Now, it would be very easy to go ahead and use it, and this, I think, would be wrong. And that's the proper, in my opinion, the proper use of the military strength of this nation.
Oh, of course. And this is one of the things that takes your time in thinking and pondering, because the practice of diplomacy, where some buddy coined the word brinkmanship, they thought they were coining something that was going to criticize very bitterly my administration, and particularly Secretary Dulles in it. After all, brinksmanship is absolutely necessary in this troubled world of ours to keep the peace. But it must be used intelligently and not just recklessly, throwing your weight around and calling your friends, criticizing your friends and dividing them, or being too unnecessarily arrogant, even with those that are hostile toward you. It is something that you do to show that you're not going to sacrifice a single vital interest of the United States, and therefore you're not going to be pushed around, but you're not going that extra step and be the bully and say, get out of my way, I'm coming through. That's not what you're doing. And it's a fine line there that everybody who, as I say, is in this great position of responsibility has got to think about, ponder, and never be weak, but never be a bully. We want to have our strength to be used in defense of freedom and liberty, and particularly in favor of those people who are our friends and our adherents to the same ideals, the same concepts of decency and fairness and justice that we are.
Oh, I agree with you. I look upon our problem in getting peace in the world is to maintain all of our strengths, our spiritual strength, our moral strength, our economic, our political, our psychological strength, and our military strength. And the military becomes the last instrument of national policy that we would ever use, but it's always there as a backup. And I would hate to see our country weaken itself from the great position that you built it into militarily on the false hopes that if we did this, we could possibly convince the enemy that we had no bad intentions against him. The trouble is the enemy isn't doing it at the same time. And that's why possibly I've laid more stress upon strength than on other parts of this campaign, because I don't want to see us reduce this strength until we feel that we can do it. Not that we would ever use it. So I don't think anybody in this country wants war. I've been through one of them, and that's enough, and I don't want my children or my grandchildren or your grandchildren or anybody's children going through war. I think we can bring peace to this world by understanding, by being willing to help where help is needed, and where reciprocity will come from that help in the form of helping us and helping the other free nations of the world.
General Eisenhower and Senator Goldwater are now walking from the barn to the barbecue area. The path is just below the terrace at the back of the house. The house, built more than 100 years ago, was restored by the General and Mrs. Eisenhower in the 1950s.
We were talking a little earlier about your book, and I'm wondering how it's coming along now.
Well, the text has all been done now, and it's a job of editing and finding the proper pictures and maps and all that sort of thing. But I ought to be done with my part of it in another month.
Well, I'm looking forward to it.
We agreed, Barry, that the conduct of foreign relations is really one of the toughest jobs for the president, and one that demands a major portion of his attention.
Well, I know how vitally interested you are and always have been in our alliances, particularly in NATO, which you were very instrumental in getting started. And of course, during my campaign up to now, and I intend to continue it, I've been laying stress on the importance of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, because I believe in this we have the real makings for an apparatus for peace in the future. I've been worried that since you left office that we haven't been paying attention to this particular alliance and others, and particularly our friends.
Well, my own reaction has been somewhat similar to that you just described as your own. Through different public speeches and so on, we seem to have been careless and have alienated some of our friends that are our very best friends. Now, not all of this is our fault, of course. We can't be solely responsible for the making of policy, but we are the leaders. Therefore, being the strong individual or a strong nation, it's up to us to be considerate, I think. So it's just so important for us to keep fine relations with Canada, with Britain, with France, Italy, Germany, and all our smaller countries, the low countries and the Scandinavians, that I just can't think of anything that's too difficult or too inconvenient for a president to do that he should fail to do if it will solidify these relationships. For my own part, when I went in the presidency, these people were my friends. All the leaders and the heads of these governments and of states were my good friends, and I made it my business to cultivate those friendships. And I think we should continue to do so, because in the principle of collective security for the West is a good one, very good. It's through cooperation we do this. And I think that America's responsibility with respect to all of these alliances, and more particularly NATO, is a little bit similar to that of the president as he leads our Federation of States.
Well, I agree with you. In fact, I have, as I said, great hope for alliances, particularly alliances with countries with whom we have so much in common. Our whole background, our heritage from Europe, and our great friendship with the Latin peoples should all be reflected in closer alliances. But I am struck by your comparison of the responsibilities of the president in the foreign field with his responsibilities as head of our nation of 50 states. And I've always been particularly impressed with your position relative to the division of powers, that the legislative branch operates separately, that the executive branch operates separately, and the judiciary branch the same. One of the basic issues I feel in this campaign has been an awakening on the American people's part that we are seeing too much of these powers now concentrated in the executive branch, or put it another way, too much of the powers of government being concentrated at the Washington level, the national level, so to speak.
Well, this is true. If we get too much of an imbalance in this diffusion of power, one as among the functional divisions of our functional branches of our government, and the other on a geographical basis, centralized in Washington and in the executive, there's the danger to our liberties and freedom, of course, grows very much greater. So I would say that to remember and respect this constitutional balance set up by our forefathers for the functions of these several branches is something that can engage the attention of a president all the time. I do not mean that they might not be, after long study, changed a little bit by agreement of our people and by, say, a constitutional amendment, but to use unrestrained power. You might say the residual power in the presidency, by reason of his social eminence and his position of moral leadership. I think if we had to saw an exaggeration of that kind of exercise of power, it would be bad. And we don't want to forget that the judicial branch and the legislative branch are each equal to the executive.
Would you agree with those people in this country who try to relate our problems solely to the growth of population, and in doing so constantly infer that the Constitution is no longer a valid document, but should be changed only because we are a growing people?
Oh, no, I should think that would be because a company is growing and it needs more than one president and so on. I don't agree with that whatsoever. The basic principles of the liberty and the rights of the individual and the meticulous division of powers between the states and the federal government and between the several branches of government, all these are basic to our practice of self-government. And I think we've functioned well under them for a couple hundred years almost, and I think we can do so if we just don't forget how important those divisions were.
I think you'll find that the American people agree with you fully on that. Now, General, this has been a very interesting day here with you at the farm. I've enjoyed it immensely, as I've always enjoyed visiting with you. There's just one question I might ask in leaving. We have discussed everything that I can think of that we should have today, but we keep getting back to the subject of war and peace. And in this campaign that Congressman Bill Miller and I are engaged in for the presidency and the vice presidency, because we constantly stress the need for a strong America, our opponents are referring to us as warmongers. And I'd like to know what your opinion of that would be. You've known me a long time, and you've known Congressman Miller a long time.
Well, Barry, in my mind, this is actual Tommy rot. Now, you've known about war. You've been through one. I'm older than you. I've been in more. But I'll tell you, no man that knows anything about war is going to be reckless about this. Now, certainly the country recognizes in you a man of integrity, a goodwill, honesty, and dedication to his country. You're not going to be doing those things that are going to, by saying, what do they call it, push button, you're going to push a button here and start a war or another here. That is just crazy. And I tell you, I can't imagine anything that, in my opinion, you would be giving more prayerful thought to than this whole business of the President's responsibility as the Commander-in-Chief of all our armed forces and as the man who's conducting our foreign relations. And he has to make these decisions in a lonely room by himself. Finally, he can listen to all the advice, but finally, in his own heart and his own mind, he's got the answer. And this applies to all the kinds of weapons you will use, the tactics, all of the ways you will use to preserve the outbreak of war. And I am sure that with this kind of an approach, you will be successful in keeping us in a road to peace.
On that note, the dialogue between General Dwight David Eisenhower and Senator Barry Goldwater came to a close. The senator warmly thanked the general for his hospitality and for his invitation to return soon. It is now late in the afternoon, and the day which began at dawn with a slight drizzle and overcast skies is now drawing to a close. From here, the senator will go to his car, which will drive him to the small airstrip in Gettysburg, where a waiting plane will take him to Washington, and from there to the next stop on his campaign tour. We've been fortunate to get this intimate view of General Eisenhower's farm, and we have been most privileged to be present on this auspicious day when General Dwight D. Eisenhower, the 34th President of the United States, and Senator Barry Goldwater, the 37th President-to-be, held their conversation at Gettysburg.